Hi, I'm Craig Rice, District 2 Representative on the Montgomery County Council, inviting you to join me for a conversation with Maryland State Senate President Mike Miller. That's coming up next, right here on County Cable Montgomery.
On this show, No Boundaries travels to the iconic Mrs. K's Toll House restaurant in Silver Spring. An eating establishment since the 1930s, Mrs. K's offers the perfect backdrop for a conversation between Montgomery County Councilmember Craig Rice and Maryland Senate President Mike Miller. Councilmember Rice starts things off with a warm welcome.
Well, Senator Miller, I just wanted to start off by saying thank you very much for being here and coming to Montgomery County. I know a place that's near and dear to your heart.
You know, I'm delighted to be here. In fact, I get to relive my teenage years at College Park. In the 60s, there was no Beltway. And my wife lived in Locust Hills Estates, right off Wisconsin Avenue, past Navy Medical. And so we're at Mrs. K's Toll House this morning, a wonderful restaurant my wife and I stopped at many times. And we used to ride up University Boulevard and come right here, Franklin Avenue, Coldfield Road, right through. This was my Beltway on my way to date my wife. We were married at Holy Redeemer Church in Kensington.
Oh, wow.
We've been married 50 years now, yeah.
You know, there's so much family aspects about Montgomery County, about the state of Maryland that folks love. So before we get into a lot of the government stuff, talk to me a little bit about your family. I know that you've got 5 kids, 4 girls, one of which I know well, that I grew up knowing through Young Democrats, but talk a little bit about your family.
Well, I'm the oldest of 10. I had Bill Clinton at my house 2 weeks ago. We raised a little money for Hillary Clinton, but he was a close friend of my mom. And I think he gravitated toward her immediately when he found out that she was the mother of 10 adult children, all registered Democrats. And so he loved my mom for many, many reasons. Now, I grew up in a rural environment. I worked in a grocery store. In those days, we sold feed, fertilizers, groceries, alcohol, a little bit of everything in Southern Maryland, tobacco bed covers, boots, what have you. And we had free delivery, free credit. Farmers didn't pay until they got the crops in, and my job was a jack of all trades. Even when I was in law school, from the time I was 10 till 24, I worked in that grocery store. I'd come up from law school, carry groceries on weekends. You mentioned your family.
It's really interesting because a lot of people don't think about Maryland being the South. And so my mother came from rural South Carolina, grew up on a farm. And so for them, it was sort of the same thing. But when I was growing up and my mom and dad met, my dad was from Hampton, Virginia, and they moved here, it was still the South to them. It hadn't urbanized. Montgomery County back then, you know, when they moved in the 70s, was still, you know, urban. I remember that there were cows and pastures and active farms all over Montgomery County.
One of my counties that I represent has a tobacco leaf as a flag. While I was in the Senate, one of my counties I represent, Charles County, was still crowning Queen Nicotina. You can imagine that. But I mean, it was a rural area. I met with the Japanese Prime Minister one time, and he said, tell me about your area. And I said, well, we grow tobacco. And he said, what do you manufacture? I said, guns. We had Beretta manufacturing. And the translator translated that I represent a toxic area. Guns and tobacco.
That would have been interesting for sure. I know that you care a lot about history. You know, history is so important because I think that as I try and teach my girls about the history of where they came from and take them down to South Carolina so that they can see, you know, where my mother and her 14 brothers and sisters grew up, you know, a real farm family, as I'm sure you understand. You know, history plays such an important part in terms of defining where we go in our future. And so I'm curious as to your thoughts, because you are such a history buff, as to how much of that you utilize to help you when it comes to not only educating your kids about what's important, but also about you yourself.
I grew up before television, you know, so for my birthdays, for Christmas, my aunts who are college educated, they would give me books, books on Custer, books on Robert E. Lee, books on George Washington, what have you, and I was a voracious reader. And being my mother was a school teacher, and her family fought for the North, my father's fought for the South. We would go at Gettysburg, we would go Bull Run, we would go to Harper's Ferry, we would travel. Each weekend we would travel, take historical tours. My grandfather owned the Mary Surratt House, which is where John Wilkes Booth stopped after he assassinated Lincoln. And so it's, I lived that history every single day. We have more history. I talked to the people from the Big Ten. I helped bring Maryland to the Big Ten along with 4 other people. And I met with all the representatives from the Big Ten. I said, you know, you have no history in the Midwest compared to what we have.
That's right.
You know, the founding of our nation, the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, World War of 1812. The British, they marched through my district. They landed at Benedict, marched right through my district on the way to Bern, Washington. There's just so much history. And if you study history, you study the mistakes that people made over history, then you can avoid repeating, because times change, but people don't. They make the same mistakes over and over again.
Yeah, that's wow. That's very powerful.
And that's helped me in governing. You know,
Yeah.
you sort of anticipate what's going to happen ahead of time, and you got to stay ahead of the curve. I study what's happening in California. I study what's happening in Ohio. I study what's happening in Florida in terms of legislators, because I know eventually, if we're not doing it in Maryland, something's going to come to Maryland, and I know how to deal with it ahead of time.
Well, I mean, blending history and what you just talked about with government, I mean, your bit of history yourself being the longest serving Senate president, not only in Maryland history, but we've tried to figure out if it's the United States as well. You know, some of the data is not there, but I think that you just have a storied career and pathway.
Well, I don't advertise it because I'm a poster child for term limits, quite frankly. Look at me, hey, we need term limits. So I had a friend of mine who was Speaker of the House in Mississippi. I had a friend of mine who was Speaker of the House in Little Rock, Arkansas. And the friend in Mississippi said, "Can I use your picture in Mississippi?" The guy said, "Yes." So he put his picture up. He said, "Why do you need?" I just want to show what people with term limits do. You get a 26-year-old Speaker of the House. so that's what he did, because you know, the people all got out of office, and all it was the people that were still there, the staff people, the bureaucrats.
Right.
And so we had a 26-year-old first-time member of the House of Delegates elected Speaker of the House, and he really didn't know what he was doing.
And it's so important that you really have folks that are going to, when it's something so important as guiding Maryland, that's one of the wealthiest states in the nation, but also one of the most integral in terms of our economic vitality as a nation.
Our state is doing very well. Honestly, you talk about our income. Montgomery County, where we are right now, is just it's the economic engine that drives the state, almost 1 million people. It's so very, very important. And part of my job is getting the people in Baltimore and the Baltimore metropolitan region to understand 270, to understand the Silver Spring Renaissance, understand what Shady Grove means to the entire state of Maryland. It's so hard because they haven't been there. They don't understand National Harbor. With the 6 hotels in Prince George's County, 16 restaurants, and what it's become, we're going to bring the FBI headquarters to the side of the town. It's so important for them to realize that, and it's a very hard sell. We talk about the wealth of our state. We are a wealthy state, but guess what? We also are one of the lowest poverty states in the Union. If you go through the South, Mississippi, Alabama, Arkansas, even Kentucky, Tennessee, you know, we are so far ahead of them, it's unbelievable.
That's right.
People talk about our tax structure, but guess what? We're the only state that builds schools. Only one of 5 states that builds schools, but we're the only state that gives part of our income tax to the county so they can hold property tax back down.
That's right.
So it's a wonderful state, and we're moving forward. We have a new Republican governor, Larry Hogan, and we're going to work with him to make positive things happen for the state. He's got his challenges because he's got his far right he's got to deal with. They're the ones that elected him in the Republican primary, so-called Tea Party people, and we're going to change, no taxes or what have you. He's got to deal with them, but at the same time, he's got to help us move our state forward. And we're going to work with him as best we can, moving our state forward, because we're not going to digress. We're not going to go back. He cost Montgomery County $20 million last year in terms of public education, and we're going to find a way to get that money back, and all the money for education this year coming in January. We're going to get all the money coming to Montgomery County this year, I promise you, because we passed a bill mandating it.
Let me just say that I really appreciate that, because education is so important, you know, and it truly goes from our K through 12 all the way up through our colleges and universities, and it's great to have a great system like University of Maryland that allows for us to continue to provide strong education that allows for positive economic development, the jobs, and just what you said, eliminates those pockets of poverty that we see that are so stagnant in other southern areas. And I think that part of it also is tying in with the new administration. As you've seen administrations come and go, You know, we now have a Republican governor, which is a little bit different for the state of Maryland, but you operated with Governor Ehrlich and others in the past, and how to navigate that pathway. I mean, what do you see as some of the challenges and some of the benefits when it comes to?
Well, the biggest challenge is that people see polar opposites, the Democrats and Republicans fighting with each other. I've never grown up in that kind of world. You know, I was the driver for the Republican candidate for governor in 1962. And the person that sat at my side all that summer and all fall was a fellow named Larry Hogan. It was Larry Hogan's dad. The governor's dad was the PR person in that campaign. So I've known the governor since he was a small child. I was young myself. I was 18 at the time. But in those days, people worked together. There were moderates in both parties. And I've been that way ever since, and I continue to be that way. Moderates on both sides bring people together to make government happen. That's not happening on Capitol Hill, and unfortunately, it's getting that way in Annapolis. But as long as you and I continue to work with branches of county government, state government, we're going to continue to move our state forward.
Online registration is about to get easier at the county's Recreation Department and Montgomery Parks. Starting with fall registration, customers can find facilities and register for classes using one convenient system and one account. The new registration system, called Active Montgomery, will allow customers to use one website, one username, and one account to register for classes and programs, as well as view facility availability for reservations. Current and new customers will need to create a new account to reserve facilities and register for classes. Building a new account should only take a few minutes and will allow you to register and pay online for classes and facilities through one login. Signing up on the new Active Montgomery site is fast, secure, and easy. For more information, visit the Active Montgomery website.
As this No Boundaries continues from Mrs. K's Toll House in Silver Spring, Montgomery County Councilmember Craig Rice and Maryland Senate President Mike Miller share what drew them to political life.
I'm curious because I know that you had mentioned that your mother was a teacher, my mother was a teacher, and oftentimes when we have these conversations, we talk about how we got into this, right? And how we sort of gravitated into this role of being an elected official. You know, from me, it was a little bit different because my mother, being from the South, a crusader who really was always trying to fight for rights and justice and wanted to make sure, and that kind of spilled over into her only child. You know, coming from a big family, she said she was only going to have one. She didn't want to have a son who had to share a bed and share a bedroom and all those kinds of things. But the interesting thing is that she always made sure that I understood that it wasn't just about what I was able to get from them in terms of benefits, but also about making sure that other people had those same access to benefits and quality of life as well.
You learn to share, and also you learn to sacrifice. I was the oldest of 10, 6 sisters right in a row after me. Wow. So guess what, of the 10 kids, we had one bathroom. Okay, one bathroom. So the girls always got the bathroom first, and there was only so much hot water in the hot water heater. So I didn't know what hot water was till I got to college, and I didn't come out of the showers. You know, I go in the showers, this hot water is as much as you want. It's unbelievable, you know. But you share. You know, the baby would cry in the middle of the night, and to keep your mother from having to get up and eat the bottle, you got up and heated the baby bottle for the baby so your mother didn't have to get up again, you know, because she was burdened with all these other children, you know. Just taking care of each other, and you learn that, and you know, and also working the family business, you learn that the customer's right. You learn how to serve, and so all those growing up attributes help in the political life, dealing with people and their constituent issues, and you feel for them, you empathize with them. Bill Clinton, you know, like when I told him my mother was dying at the White House, he started crying because he was thinking of his mother. I started crying. My wife and Hillary kept looking at these two guys crying at each other, you know, and they wanted. And he asked for the Marine for a pencil and paper. Of course, nobody's got a pencil and paper. So 2 more minutes of he and I crying together, the President of the United States and me. And he calls her up the next day, and tells her what a wonderful person she was, and talked to her for 20 minutes. And then 2 days later, she gets a handwritten note. Dear Esther, just a short note to tell you how much I enjoyed talking to you, signed Bill. And then she dies 13 days later. So people like that, when he was at Oklahoma, feeling the pain of his people, he feels your pain. You know, he's a great man. He has some great faults, we all acknowledge, but he has a great ability to relate to people. And that's the reason that you know, I had this fundraiser for his wife. I would do anything for a man that acknowledged my mother the way he did.
Absolutely. Well, I think that a lot of times people forget that we're people, right? When they see elected office, especially a person who's got power like you, that's a state Senate president, and from what I've always known, the Mike Miller behind the Senate president, the longest standing Senate president, the man who makes things happen in Annapolis, you're still a person. Right?
Yeah, but I don't like the use of the word power. I mean, you're there, the body comes together and elects you, okay? Each year they come, Republicans and Democrats. You know, unlike in Capitol Hill, I think it's going to change eventually, but Republicans and Democrats both elect me. They both all vote for me, okay? But the word power, what I do is like a jockey, very light on the reins. I mean, very light on the reins. So I put the best people in the places to make the decisions, and then assign the bills. I have someone else assign the bills. And let the power come forward. Let the voice of the people at the public hearings come to the committees, the committee chairman, and then the bills come to the floor. So even though I might disagree with the bill comes to the floor and it becomes law.
And I think that it's important for that sort of mindset to be able to figure out, you know, what is going to be best for the body, what's going to be best for the state of Maryland as a whole moving forward. I know one of the primary concerns for you when it comes to about what's best for Maryland is education. You know, just through your own children, but then also through yourself and growing up. I know that we're both proud Terps, so education from kindergarten all the way through to getting a job is extremely important. You know, beyond your mother being a teacher, what are the things that made you decide that you really wanted to focus on education and education be the forefront?
I mean, again, I'm a history student, whether it's Thomas Jefferson or Abraham Lincoln or whoever one of your heroes is. I mean, they are what they are because of education. Some had more education than others, but just yesterday morning I happened to be reading through Lincoln's speeches. The Gettysburg Address is probably the most beautiful essay under 300 words ever written, and I just read it again just yesterday for here's this man who had no education, but he is self-taught. We need to make sure everybody has an education, you know, and in that regard, what we've done just in the past 6 years in Maryland, we've taken our college system from the 7th most expensive to the 27th least expensive. In other words, we've paid down. We've paid down, so the colleges didn't suffer. But what we did from our resources, we said, look, we've got to make certain that everybody has an opportunity to go to college.
That's right.
And we said that anybody goes to community college, graduates from community college, be average, we're going to give them access to the 4-year colleges, and affordable 4-year colleges. And like I say, I'm the oldest of 10, all went to college. 8 of them went to College Park. One went to UMBC, one went to St. Mary's, but my mother pushed us all along the way.
You know, being the chair of the council's education committee, one of the things is I go around and I talk to kids, and they always ask, you know, what is it that the county council does? And it's hard to try and explain to young children, you know, this complex mechanism of government. And one of the things that I've tried to simplify it is that it's about opportunity, right? When I think about my parents and the reason why they came here, it was about making sure that they provided me with an opportunity to be whatever it is that I wanted to be. And that's really what we try and fight for every single day.
Well, that's your role on the council, but you're also an outstanding member of the House of Delegates. What do you find different than being from a member of the House of Delegates in Annapolis to your role now as a county councilman from Montgomery County?
Well, I think that, you know, there's more overarching policy, right? So I remember being in Annapolis and having a young woman come in to the office and say that she was being bullied. And it was the reason why we had the bullying bill that came about. Those are the kinds of things that you can't do at the local level. And so those are the great things that you can affect overarching policy. But at the local level, you get to affect day-to-day life as well. And so when it comes to folks that are having issues and challenges with a special needs student, and that day they need to try and get their child in that school or to get the services that they need to help that parent at home to make sure that that child continues to be in that program, those are the kinds of things that we can do too. So it really is fulfilling to be able to have it to be able to see on both sides, ways in which you can impact people's lives.
Right. Well, it's so important that, first of all, I was a member of a 16-member House delegation. I served in the House delegation first, and then it was more of a group. And then you get a member of a Senate delegation, member of 8, but you have delegates and senators, but as president of the Senate, you're kind of alone. You don't have the camaraderie. You don't have the people helping you along the way, and so you kind of, it's very lonely at times.
Did you know that since 1963, the Literacy Council of Montgomery County has provided English language instruction for adults?
Expiration, it's abbreviated, right?
LCMC offers a variety of free or low-cost learning pathways for students at all levels, including individual, small group, and classroom options.
Comparing the compound sentences.
We rely on volunteers to help provide many of our direct services, along with professional educators.
Was here, Excellency, I don't have to teach you.
The Literacy Council of Montgomery County serves 1,500 learners annually. If you'd like more information about our adult literacy programs, or you would like to volunteer, please call 301-610-0030 or go to literacycouncilmcmd.org. For this final segment of No Boundaries from Mrs. K's Toll House Restaurant in Silver Spring, the conversation between Councilmember Craig Rice and State Senate President Mike Miller turns to achieving a work-life balance.
One of the things I know that is important to you is making sure that you're there for your family. But I also know that it's tough, balancing and juggling between political life and being at home and trying to get to all the things that they have, especially with a larger family. I only have 2 daughters, and when I first took that oath and was sworn in back in 2006, being a House of Delegates member and having my oldest daughter at the time that was only 2 and now is 13, and I say to myself, my gosh, this is just crazy in terms of how fast time has flown, but they've been always a part of everything that it is that we do. How do you deal with that work-life balance?
Well, the tough part was on my wife. My wife is a saint. She's from Montgomery County. We got married after my first year of law school, and my mother didn't want to come to the wedding because she wanted me to finish law school before I got married. But what happened, so I had to promise her I wouldn't have any children until I got out of law school. By the time I got to law school, I had 4 children. So we had 3 girls in 1 year. Wow. We had a boy, so we had 2, 1, and twins. So we had, if you can believe this or not, this is before Pampers. So we had 4 diaper pails outside of a 2-bedroom apartment in Greenbelt. Those were tough times, and that was tough. Having 3 girls age 13 at the same time. It's good when they have the swim meets: 3rd place Miller, 2nd place Miller, 1st place Miller. Right. But having 3 of them dealing with boys at age 13, 14, 15, it was kind of traumatic times.
That's wow.
But it's good when you election. They each have a different poll to work.
There you go.
Hey, I'm Mike Miller's daughter. Please vote for my dad.
Yeah, and it always is. It's amazing that it's always a family affair. Being there at the polls. I mean, my mom and dad still work the polls,
sure.
And it really is something that supports family. I do remember one of the times when I was on the floor when we got called for a special session, and it was in November. And the governor had called a special session, and it happened to be the Saturday that was my daughter's 2nd birthday.
Yeah.
And so there I was sitting there on the floor phone, listening as they sang happy birthday. And so those are some of the things that I think that a lot of folks don't understand about the sacrifices that we make, for the betterment and for the good of our state, our communities as a whole. We really care, and our families have to be understanding. And I couldn't agree with you more. My wife is an absolute saint as well. We couldn't do it without them. I mean, they're just so instrumental in terms of enabling us to do the things that we do.
I know it's a team effort, it's a family effort, and being in the legislature, it's like a family environment. So, for example, when my youngest daughter was born, almost 4 decades ago. Margaret Schweinert, who was the crown dame of Montgomery County politics at the time, Senator Montgomery County, presented us with a director's chair with her name on the back of it, Amanda. You know, and
Wow.
so it's we're all part of a family, and our kids grow together. We get to know each other's wives, and it's very, very important. They understand politics. They're more interested in politics than the normal person because their dad's involved in politics, and so they're reading the Washington Post, the Baltimore Sun, checking the news each day, and saying not about just their dad, but what's happening on Capitol Hill. So it's sort of like a civics lesson at the family breakfast table.
I think that both you and I, going to University of Maryland, have seen the progress over the years of University of Maryland, which back in my day used to be seen as a safe school.
If they'd have doubled my SATs, I couldn't have get into University of Maryland right now. It's so tough to get in there, believe me. It's so tough to get in there. But we've got Shady Grove doing well. Montgomery County Junior College is one of the best community colleges, not just in the state, but in the United States. Yep. And College Park, I'm telling you, it's one of the top universities around. And of course, the move to Big Ten helped, not just in terms of athletics, in terms of revenues, but also in terms of academic consortiums.
That's right.
It's a very well-respected academic institution now, tied in with the University of Wisconsin, Michigan, Illinois, what have you. Yeah. It's great for our educational system.
One of the things that a lot of people don't know is I actually started off at University of Illinois. So I started at a Big Ten school, and so it was kind of a coming home when I heard that University of Maryland was going to join the Big Ten. I said, oh great, now I can root and be pro Big Ten again. And it works really well. It was a little bit tough when we were dealing with ACC, but I think it's really good, and it ties so well into our economic development strategy, right? Something that I think is going to continue to move the state forward. I know that Governor Hogan's talked a lot about that, and talked a lot about changing to a Department of Commerce.
And before Hogan, though, 3 years ago, we took the state tax off family farms. So your farms in Upper Montgomery County, for example, those can go to the next generation, by not being taxed off the farm because they pay no estate tax on the farms to keep them into farming. Right. Okay. Even before Hogan came along, we were raising the estate tax by $500,000 a year to get up to the $5 million level. Right. In terms of being exempt from taxation when you die. Right. And so we created the Augustine Commission before Governor Hogan came in, saying, Mr. Augustine, the former head of Lockheed Martin, what can we do to make our state more business friendly? Because guess what? The people in Washington are shutting down Washington. They're sequestering people. So it's affecting Bethesda, NIH, Goddard, NASA, Census Bureau. And so we're moving ahead as a state, and we're welcoming the relationship with the governor to make our state even more business friendly.
That's right, and I think that that's one of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand. Automatically folks assume that being business friendly is R versus D, and it's not. It's not. It's about us as a community, as a state, moving forward and doing what's best by our community. And so I think that it really is important for us to highlight that. In Montgomery County, we just privatized our economic development and are moving in a different direction, again, under leadership of all Democrats.
Created a whole new cybersecurity system in Montgomery County.
So the outlook, I think, for Montgomery County, for the state of Maryland, is truly bright. And I know that that can't happen without partnership with the state.
Well, it'll continue. You have a great county executive. Ike Leggett's one of my dearest friends. You have a great county council. You have great senators and delegates from Montgomery County. They all have positions of leadership. Rich Madaleno, Roger Maddow, Nancy King. Montgomery County is now the only county that has 3 members of the 8 on the Budget and Taxation Committee. Where all the resources come from, they're key decision makers, and you have 5 other Montgomery senators that do equally well. Really fine representatives.
Well, I think that it's clear that Montgomery County is firmly entrenched in trying to ensure the future is bright for the state of Maryland. And I know through your leadership, that's going to continue as well. I just want to say thank you very much to you, Senator Miller. It's been great to catch up with you and learn a little bit more about you and talk about some things that are really important to both of us. I want to thank Mrs. K's Toll House for opening up their doors to us. This has been absolutely terrific. So thanks so much, sir.
Privilege and honor.
Thank you.
Good to see you, as always,
all right.
my friend.
Take care.
Thank you.